our speaker is Jennifer Appel. She has a landscape architecture website, landscapehouston.com. Organic fertilizer, seed, feed, compost tea, similar to what John Torrey was talking about yesterday, taking that compost tea, and so we'll get to hear about that. And appelgreenroof.com. I'm sure Jennifer will tell us about that. Flew in something. Climb the Great Wall of China, like skydiving, road racing, motorcycles. I started on the wrong page. I'm sorry. Jennifer, she's an Aggie, class of 91, registered landscape architect, licensed irrigator, certified soil food web advisor, and then all those things I said earlier. But she broke her foot, and it wasn't road racing, motorcycles, or skydiving, but it was probably just as dramatic how she broke her foot, and she may or may not tell you how she did that. So, Jennifer, you're up. And
good morning, everybody. How you doing? Fabulous. Good luck, Aggies in the crowd. All right, I'm Aggie class of 91. I was president of the Rotary Club in Houston, and so can everybody hear me? Okay, because I'm going to hobble a little bit.
You want a microphone or you want to yell?
What would you guys prefer?
Microphone.
No, she can yell.
Actually,
You can hear.
if you're going to stand over there, I'm going to put this one because we're being videotaped, and he can pick that up. That one's that's for him. This one is. Just leave that one there. This is. You can do this and be like a singer.
That is a green roof. That is done at the Marriott in downtown Houston. About a $200 million project right on the Metro rail line at Dallas. And I added that in there. You're going to see a bunch of pictures from Land Sculpture and Design. It's our design build landscape architecture business. I did it for 14 years. Got into the organic fertilizer business because you need your plants to grow. Went from there into the composting business. And one of the things I wanted to show you recently is that there was a study published stating that there is a salt-loving proteobacteria, and this is what he looks like, that eats seaweed. And we don't really know yet if this is something that should be released into the wild or if it should stay in a container. But if it's a containerized organism, and that's what the little legs look like, we might be able to take our seaweed into a fantastic liquefied soil amendment and then use the remainder in compost. And what you're going to see is a bunch of pictures of using a finished biological compost with really great organisms in it that allow plants to grow in the most amazing and unusual places, like up on top of buildings or in structural soil. Would anybody plant any grass on their driveway?
Yeah, he grows anyway.
Right. Well, we're growing roses in structural soil because of the type of compost that we're using. And what you guys have is a definite portion, or the black gold portion, of a compost pile. And what we've been doing over the past couple of years, while we've been running around speaking around the country, is telling people to use compost and how to do it correctly. And there's lots of different kinds of compost. Whoops. And we did lose our little pictures there. One easy way to take care of it is to have it blown in and put it in a foot deep, directly on top of whatever you've got there, and you plant directly in it. And when you listen to people talk about compost, they're going to tell you that there are 3 parts to it: the chemical, the physical properties. And it doesn't really matter what they started with. You're going to have guys that think that municipal solid waste is the best stuff, or food residuals, or raw manure. You guys are the green waste. Your seaweed is the green part. Interestingly enough, there is a child's nursery rhyme that says, 3 parts brown to 1 part green will keep everything healthy and smelling clean. You guys are the green. It goes with the brown, the leaves and the branches. There are 3 types of organisms that we look for in our compost. The guys that like air, the aerobic guys. the guys that don't like air, the anaerobic guys, and the facultative guys. They switch. They're little Jekyll and Hydes. They can live in an aerobic environment, or they can live in a deoxygenated environment. And when the conditions are right, they switch back and forth. When we look at compost for plants, we want to have all the aerobic guys in the pile. We don't really want the anaerobic guys. They're the breakdown guys. That first picture that I showed you, he's a breakdown guy. Okay? The breakdown guys make things stink. We want to get those in the very first part of the process and then get to the aerobic side, because that's what lets things grow. Then we go into our different types of organisms, the bacteria, the protozoa.
Back to the fire ants.
We'll pull that one at the end. Yeah. The more fungally dominated your compost is, the more water retention you're going to have. And the more nematodes you have, fewer termites, fewer mosquitoes you'll have in that area. Where you guys are concerned with is the plants, the organic matter, and the bacteria. I'm sorry I brought this as a Photodex program, not like in the Mac. But it doesn't matter what you start with. What we want to do is get all the right organisms into that finished product so that that can be sold. And it will be very beneficial. Go like this. How many of y'all work with dune restoration? Cool. Can you imagine planting just a couple little plants and having a seaweed tea that would make things bloom in under a month? And then stay like that for 22 months?
You go without water.
Absolutely. We get the right biological organisms in there. Your plants can pull moisture out of the air, whether it's a salt-tolerant grass or not. When we look at the scientific data, we are looking at hyphal diameter. And funny, in nature, she likes the fat guys. The hyphal diameter, which is that last group over there on the right, as long as it is larger than the 3.25, and the hyphal is his leg. So we want them to get really, really fat. The fatter they are, the more beneficial they are. The thinner they are, the more dangerous they are. And when we look at getting the right type of fungi in there, we can get enormous yields of nitrogen potential that is usable by the plants, not the stuff that goes up into the air, goes into the water. And if we're talking about, and you can ask me different questions about where you want to use your seaweed teas or compost, but out here, nothing's growing, right? We don't have any fungi in the sand. Weeds, very little fungi, lots of bacteria. Still things are being broken down. When we get to grass, we have a fungal to bacterial relationship of a 1-to-1. So when we take a sample, put it under the microscope, and look at it, we're seeing even measures of these guys. When we was going to grow plants, we got more fungi than bacteria. Who's been to the forest? Does grass grow under a tree? No. Because there's lots of fungi. Got a question for you. How long does a bacteria live for?
Hundreds of years.
How about 30 minutes on average? Born, goes to school, gets married, has children, gets a condo and a swimming pool, becomes a grandparent, and dies all during one sitcom. But a fungus, how long can it live for?
Yeah, that's what I said.
There you go.
Hundreds and hundreds.
Hundreds and hundreds of years, right. A bacterium, teeny tiny microscopic organism, fungi, 9 miles wide. For real. When we get the right organisms going in your piles, this is what it's worth. It's enormously profitable for a very small amount of material, but done correctly, it's gold. Mostly, the clients, they don't care what we use, just as long as their plants grow and their flowers bloom. And it smells like real flowers and not like a chemical, right? We did the project at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. Some of you may or may not know about it. It is a green roof test plot. There are 6 manufacturers, 5 global, myself, 3 white roofs and 3 black roofs. And what they are doing is measuring to find out whether green roofs can reduce the urban heat island. And what they found over the last 2 years is that the Appel green roof can hold more than 80% of the moisture that falls on it. It is cooler in the summertime and warmer in the wintertime and establishes plants faster. So another avenue for you guys to be able to outlet is moving into the emerging green market and the green roof market, where people will be landscaping on top of their houses and buildings for energy efficiency. Pretty much you cut your utilities about in half on day one. So, but they should flower. They should flower all the time. And a good part of that, as just about anyone who's ever made compost tea will tell you, is having the minerals and the vitamins from seed and seed plants in the mix. We also do compost for maintenance. So another outlet for you guys is the ability to get with landscapers and having them using the waste what you guys are taking in as a waste product and turning into a profitable saline product. You put about 1 inch on the grass every spring and fall, and you make compost tea and run that liquid through your irrigation system as a midpoint maintenance. Interestingly enough, we like to have people blow compost. It's a lot easier than getting a shovel and a wheelbarrow. TxDOT did a bunch of erosion control studies and have been doing them for the better part of the last 4 years. And what they found is when they get a really good finished biological compost with all the organisms in it and stick it up on a 30-degree slope and then rain on top of it, nothing comes off. So the question of, does it need irrigation? No. Not when you have the right organisms. We also know that this is a great way to deal with brownfield issues. Brownfield meaning after the land is pretty much useless, how do you reestablish it so that it will grow? Yes! I didn't even have to say anything! Who knows what real compost tea is? We're about to find out. Everybody with me? Liquid compost. Say it. Liquid compost. Liquid compost. Are you guys asleep? There's 3 ways to make it. I won't get into that you can find it at the blogs at Landscape Vitamins. But brewing is like making a pot of coffee, and fermenting is like making sun tea. And if you're going to go to the extracting, you're looking at about a $60,000 machine, but it makes about 4,000 gallons in an hour. So it depends on your volume of what you're doing. Let's think about this. How much material do you need to make a yard of compost? And then what is that yard of compost worth? It's worth more if you liquefy it down and sell it as a fluid than if you sell it as a solid. Made correctly, it's absolutely non-toxic. You can bathe in it if you want to. We apply all of our compost tea through our patented vitamin tank, which is a little tank that goes on the irrigation system, and you push test, and it automatically applies the whole thing at once at an even rate. We have free specifications for you guys. They're at Landscape Vitamins. They've been approved by the City of Houston, used by the landscape architects. Now I'm open for questions.
Where was they getting compost? Out of Sargassum.
Well, we're going to, when it clicks, it's going to start rolling over again. So. Wow. God said, let there be light. Okay.
Me starting on the left.
Amen. All right, we were talking about making some compost with this, right? What have you been told? What have you learned so far about composting with the seaweed?
Salt.
Yeah, it's salty. So what are we going to do? First, we're going to wash it down, right? And we're going to make a tea from that first flush so that we can take a lot of the salt out. But we also want to stew that seaweed so that a lot of the nutrients, the minerals, the vitamin E, the B1, the B12, we start getting those things out of the seaweed, and that becomes our base liquid material. Then you take what's left from that and you throw that into the pile. And because we're looking at a 3-to-1 ratio when we're making compost, 3 browns to 1 green, you can add the seaweed in as the green, and your browns would be leaves, brush. But grass trimmings are green. So if you're going to do grass trimmings, you can only do, you're going to have to split your percentages up that way. If the pile stinks, it means it's anaerobic, there's not enough air getting into the pile. The way that the pile was designed needs some adjustment. There are several methods that we look at in order to get air induction into a pile without having to windrow it. If you want to windrow it, you can. It just depends on your area and how you've got your space set up. But in done correctly, if you've already got the correct organisms on the brown side of the pile, you can break down the seaweed in weeks to months depending on your temperature and rainfall. Did that answer your question?
No. The question was, have you made
compost? I thought you said, how do you make compost with it?
No, have you done it?
I've worked with other people that have composting operations, and we've done everything from dewater it down to just dropping it straight down.
How did it work?
If you are in a very hot, humid climate and it rains a lot, it is a nasty process. If you are in a drier environment, it is a workable process. It also requires, some places you have to actually chip down the seaweed and put it with a really hot pile in order to get it to compost. If it's cool, it won't break down. So, did I answer your question?
What's the intrinsic salt content of seaweed? Is it high, low? And I understand you have to rinse it, but what happens after you rinse it? Does it maintain a lot of salt in it? Or?
Not really.
All I want to know.
Your seaweed content is going to depend on the water where it came from, because it literally detoxifies the water around it. So if you're pulling it from an area where there's some kind of chemical spill or sewage sludge, you're going to have those kind of toxins within the leaf itself.
Yeah, but I'm just salt.
Salt can be, for the most part, could be washed. In my experience, can be washed.
Intrinsically, though. I mean, after it's been rinsed, does it still have a high salt content or not?
Somewhat. But salts break down with the right type of bacterias. I mean,
break down in sodium.
Well, yeah, it already is NaCl. So.
I know, but it's the reason I'm asking is because we saw a presentation in October, and I think it's by Joe Fox, and he had stated that somebody had tried to do a composting, selling seaweed as a soil conditioner or whatever, and that he didn't have very much success because he probably wasn't rinsing. So the reason I'm asking is, if you rinse it, that I realize that would get rid of a lot of the external salt, but does it maintain it intrinsic?
It has a certain. You guys want to agree with me? It has an internal intrinsic component.
Yeah, it's got those little bulb sacks, and when you pop them, they squirt. And I thought that's partly salt water. I mean, I've kind of tempted to taste it a couple times. It seems pretty salty.
Why not? All the fluid in there is going to be hypersaline.
Yeah.
So that's why I was talking about a 2-stage process as opposed to just trying to dry it out on the beach and then dump it into the compost pile. You're not going to get the answer. You will get an extreme salt in the compost, which then most of the good organisms that I've been talking about, they don't want a salty environment. That's why it's so cool that we have this AW4, this new guy, who can come in and really likes that environment. The problem with having a new guy that we've invented or have found is that it's a Pandora's box. We don't know what he's going to do if he gets released into the wild.
What is that AW4? What is it?
Hold on just a minute. I'm going to get my piece of paper over here.
Jennifer, can you repeat the questions?
It's a Halomonas species, and its technical species number is AW4. And that's what that picture was. The green guy?
What's a Halomonas?
It's a proteobacteria that likes salt. It lives in extreme cold conditions. It can live in extreme warm conditions. They found this in Antarctica, and they found out that this is the guy who likes to eat seaweed. And what he does, he goes in and he literally decimates the seaweed, but then he contains all the toxins. So we have to look at the guy who breaks him down and eats him as dinner so that we can get rid of the toxins. They use it for breaking down toxic seaweed.
And it survives in extreme cold and extreme heat. For real.
Remember we talked about there's the aerobic guys, the anaerobic guys, and the facultative anaerobes? He is a facultative anaerobe. He can live in a deoxygenated environment, or he can live in an oxygenated environment. So it's kind of like the cockroach, only better. He can live underwater. Yes?
So you have this little guy eating all the salt.
And the seaweed.
And then he's full of salt. What happens when he croaks?
Somebody eats him, and then somebody eats him, and somebody eats him, and somebody eats him.
But the salt's still there?
Well, he has a process of breaking it down. Now we look at the next guy in the food chain and say, okay, now how do you deal with this, and how do you deal with this? But you can do your own research. I just wanted to show you a picture of what he looks like, because at last count, I think there were more than 72 articles that have come out about this guy since May the 2nd, and you need to make your own decision, you know. It's still green and fresh at the moment of what's good and bad on this one. But I want you to at least have a picture in your mind and so you can go, yeah, I've seen him! Because nobody else will have. All right, what else?
What about the food web? I was just wondering, do you know how far up the food chain it goes as far as...
You and me, babe. We are the things that eat the things that eat the things that eat the things that eat the things.
Well, I mean, fish, etc. I mean, it goes all the way up.
Back here. Yes.
Your slide on the protozoans and fire ants?
Yes. Oh, this is the most well-kept secret in the world, apparently. In 2004, the USDA finally completed their multi-year study to determine that, oh my gosh, the naturally occurring God-given protozoa that exist in soil, provided you don't use any synthetic chemicals or Roundup, are the natural predators of fire ants. You see, back in the 60s, 50s, when we decided to DDT the entire world from the Mississippi River over, we allowed the fire ant to come across because we killed the guy who would keep him out of the yard. So if you're using a good fungal-dominated compost with a good protozoa count in there, you will not have any fire ants. That's the Hatfields and the McCoys, and the protozoa win every single time. Ha ha, call me. All right. Yes?
Every time I hear green roof, I think about my beloved house, which has the old wood shingles under the asphalt shingles, and if I put a new roof, I have to pull the whole thing off because it's too heavy for the house. That's what they tell me. I don't believe them most of the time. If I went and put a garden on top of Walmart, would the roof of Walmart be able to hold up the extra weight?
Okay. You're so lucky. My background is in civil engineering, architecture, landscape architecture, and soil microbiology, so I'm going to be able to answer that question for you. A regular residential roof in this country has got a minimum load capacity of 20 pounds per square foot, which is why we don't get up and do the jitterbug on them, but we can get up there in order to fix them. So yes, you would have to remove both sets of shingles, your shakes, plus your asphalts in order to do it. The Walmart, on the other hand, is a commercial building. And chances are it's got a minimum weight load of anywhere from 10 pounds, if it's just got light ballast on it, all the way up to 100 pounds per square foot, depending on what type of structure it is. Yes, we can do green roofs on their building and on yours, but the difference is instead of having to go up there and replace the roof every 10 to 12 years at a $10 to $12 a foot cost, the green roof does not ever need replacing. And it can drop, at least the Appel green roof shown at Lady Bird Johnson was able to drop the roof temperature between a standard roof and a green roof by more than 30 degrees C. So you can kind of get the idea. If most people, you go up on that roof and it's 186 degrees in the summertime, but you put the Appel green roof on there and it's only 80 degrees. Most people put their air conditioning units in the attic, So your poor little guy is working from 186 degrees all the way down to 76. Why don't you give it a break and let him go from 80 to 76? You can tell I have lots of friends in the utilities industry.
Most of your green roofs start off with a couple inches of perlite.
Yeah. Anything from
Most
2.
of them float. It's that
Well,
light.
no, actually, we've got stuff in there for more than 5 years. We've got it on sloped roofs. We've got them in Hawaii, Mexico, South America, the United States.
Oh, what I meant with the perlite base was light.
Oh yeah, it's extremely light. It's the lightest media in the world, so we're having a lot of fun with them. But because there's no. If you know what perlite is, it's the extruded carbon material that comes from diamond mines that isn't an actual diamond. We need to be able to put the biology into that media so that plants will grow in it, right? Because there's no real plants grown in the diamond mines. Seaweed, really, really important. In fact, there's a huge market for seaweed fertilizers, and basically it is that first part that you're talking about. It is the liquid wash with some parts of the actual seaweed in there. That in most cases, most of the seaweed guys use phosphoric acid as a stabilizer, and phosphoric acid is the same thing as in a Coca-Cola can. I mean, it's what takes your tooth, you put it in there, and tomorrow morning there won't be a tooth anymore. It does the same thing to the roots of plants. So, okay, what else? Yes, sir.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Oh, okay, Jennifer. I live out here in the sandbar, as they call it, and I use tons of tons of compost from the city for free. The city offers 3 different variants of mulch. One is a fine coffee powder compost, which could be blown. Although I noticed that guy wasn't wearing a mask, and I tell you what, I just scatter it with a flat shovel off the back of my full-size pickup truck. And I scattered all over the grass, which I have indigenous wild Bermuda.
Nice.
Nice, because otherwise it's just beach sand. I mean, all these hills all the way back to Fingers, it's just beach sand. So you put that compost on there, and you get it from the city for free. As long as you shovel it yourself into your pickup truck, or you pay $10 and a big old skip loader booms it in the back, and boy, you got to watch that. You get a couple of tons out of it. But it's just really great. So I really use that compost, and only a few times have I had it come out a little bit too hot to where it's yellow. For example, some new plantings, because I also dig 2-3 feet, planting big laurel palms and stuff like that, and in my property, and because I've got some adjacent property next to my house that I bought as an extra lot. I got that all fenced in, I got all kinds of nature back there and stuff. But that compost is the trick. I've got about a 20-degree slope at the front to the street on that extra lot. And I've got compost all in there, and it does not go to the gutter. I mean, it takes a deluge rain for that to even try to run off through that compost in the grass. It stays.
Who in here works with, anybody doing dune restoration or wetland restoration or slope stabilization? What are you using right now?
Well, I've actually been growing plants with just seaweed from the beaches, just bringing it right
straight
on plants in greenhouses. I haven't gone out to the dunes yet. My advisor does dune restoration projects.
Yeah, I saw a lot of stuff in Ireland where people just literally go out there and haul up as much seaweed as they possibly can and literally drop it right straight on the fields. It's fantastic for potatoes, and so yeah. And they don't even wash it. I mean, they just drop it.
Oh, that's one of the things I was looking at, because dune plants have lived on the beach next to the sea. They've probably become adapted to seed spray and a lot of those type of natural things that happen on the beach. So you need to wash it if they can handle it. I understand that garden plants are different. Have you seen any?
Well, I look at it I try to look at it from the natural perspective of it by saying, hey, there was a reason why the seaweed was out there, and then it got washed here, and then it degraded the way it did, and then amazingly enough, we could have some sea oats, and then we could have some dune restoration, and then we could, it made logical sense. So if we try to follow the same format that was put before us, I try to always remember. Anybody remember with the Inca society? Anybody know when they vanished from the face of the planet? They had more miles of paved roads and better irrigation systems than we have in this country today.
Yeah, but that was the aliens.
The empire's there, the people are not. But I mean, think about there was a way to do things that has worked for a lot longer, and so if we just try to put that same system back into play, it's going to work. Hold on, anybody in the back? Because I can't see you behind the post. Okay, one more.
Question, you talked about toxins.
Yes.
And you said there were toxins in the seaweed, and you did describe a little bit about part of their journey. So it's, in a nutshell, by the time they're getting into the composition of the state, the toxins have been...
Oh, yeah! Well, I don't care whether you've got arsenic in there, or, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that can be in seaweed. If seaweed's been growing next to a toxic waste dump, or anywhere along the Gulf Coast where we dump all of our PCBs into the water straight, it's a cleaner system. And the bacteria, the types of bacteria that we use in the composting process, especially the anaerobic guys and the facultative anaerobes, they eat toxins. In fact, well-made compost tea for your lawn, if it gets on the side of the truck, you put the truck in at night, you get up the next morning, there's no paint there. I mean, they love to eat toxins. That is their function on this planet. There is the secondary group, the protozoa, come in and they clean out all the bacteria. And as they eat those guys and poop, they make different nutrients that are then eaten by the fungi. And by the time it gets to the fungi and the nematode level, for the most part, all that they're putting out are good quality nutrients for the plants. And people say, oh, it's bad nematodes. No, there's more than 1,000, there are 1,007 different DNA nematodes at last count, and only 7 of them are bad. So there's more than 1,000 good ones out there.
We're putting seaweed that has not been on the whole process. We're then putting the toxins there.
Yeah.
Piling up our toxins and putting them where we want to put them.
Right, but the same thing happens with manure compost. I mean, if you have municipal solid waste or cow manure that's not finished or chicken manure that's not finished, all you're doing is putting toxins back out on your soil. It's no different. So we want to get to a fully composted, finished biological compost at the end before we stick it back out on the ground, because that's what's going to give you your best benefit, and you won't have the yellowing if it's a totally finished. And finished is the cooled part of the pile, not the hot, steamy side. Yes?
I want to clarify something here. Seaweed that's out here right now, if it hasn't gone by anything toxic, then it doesn't have anything toxic in it, right?
Correct. I mean, just like you and I.
So it only has...
If we haven't had a whole bunch of beer, we're not going to smell like beer, right? Okay.
Right, so most of the stuff that we have along here, unless something has happened...
But realize you've got refineries, you've got stuff that's going back into the water, and the seaweed is there to help clean the water. So. Okay, I don't have a watch on.
Take a couple more questions.
Okay. Go for it.
You were talking about the green part and the brown part.
Yes.
And my compost heap usually had too much green and it practically caught fire.
That's methane.
Well, it went fast.
Sure.
Anyway, out here we have the golden part of the seaweed, it's the brand new, and then we have the black part that's yesterday's or the day before's. Could we take that and call it the brown part of the pile?
Technically, it's going to break down like a green. I mean, whether it's a red seaweed or a brown seaweed or...
Well, it's all the same seaweed.
Right.
When it comes up further, it's
decaying more, but as it breaks down, it does not break down like wood. It breaks down like a green. So we keep it on the green side.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Where can we get this? Do you have to special order it, or how is it going to come?
Give me a noun for this.
Your fertilizer.
Landscape vitamins. But you'll just get with me afterwards. What I'll ask you to do is to send me a sample of what you've got so that we can build specific for what you need. Because chances are what you're making, your chocolate chip cookies are not like her chocolate chip cookies. They're not like his chocolate chip cookies, and they're not like your chocolate chip cookies. But amazingly enough, they're all chocolate chip cookies. It's just they're all a little bit different. And so if we can look specifically at the organisms that you need to cultivate versus the ones that he needs to cultivate, it's a more appropriate blend. Think about this. When you want to get all the little bugs coming to your pile, think about you're going to have Christmas dinner. And you've got some guests that are coming from the Northeast, and you've got some guests that are coming from the Bible Belt in the South, and you've got some guests that are coming in from California, and you've got some extra guests that are coming in from China. And chances are, the whole group is not going to be excited about the sauerkraut, or the cornbread, or the spring rolls, but you got to have enough stuff in there for everybody so that they'll all stay at the table. Got it? Yes? Or are you just pointing your finger and saying, yeah?
If the city was able to have the expense of trucking and a multitude of this sargassum through the solid waste dump, which is actually about 16, 17 miles from here, then would they also have the expense of having to, chemically adapt to use sargassum in compost, is what I'm saying. To take the sargassum from here instead of stacking, backstacking. Some things are controversial when it comes to putting this into dune vegetation, and we've heard of all that for the last 2 days. So if somebody said, well, you know what, let's just pay to truck it to the dump and then we're going to make compost out of it, would it be real complicated to do that thing?
Nope.
Would it take that AW four-wheel drive stuff?
What I would look at is taking it, liquefying for the first process, so that you have a saleable product for the market already with what you're washing. As you're washing to get rid of the salt, you can do a leach, which becomes a base for a really good seaweed extract, which just about everybody who doesn't live near the coast wants, whether they know it or not. Their soils do. Remember, the earth used to be covered mostly by water, and that's how we got all that nutrient content that we've been blowing out with all the fertilizers.
Like somebody like you to be able to figure this out here and do it, though.
Thank you! Thank you very much. The presentation's over now. That's what I do, is to go to people or consult with people who say, look, we got this and we got that. We don't really know how to make any money out of it, but we think we have a good idea. Yeah. But I mean, that's the point, is to say, here's what you have that's a problem. And you need a revenue stream. Let's figure out how to take this and turn this into something that's profitable, that's going to be a win-win all the way around the block. Because that's what's fun for me. Yes?
One of the big issues that I know a lot of townships have with moving the seaweed off the beach is the amount of sand that is in the seaweed. And
that is a disaster.
I still have not seen throughout this week that there's a way to really, really remove that sand from the seaweed with just the way that the physical properties of it are.
Okay.
So that's kind of...
I'm with you on that. I apologize for not being here for the last 2 days. Obviously, I was a little hung up. I know that I've talked to John about this at least in last year's, and when I spoke for the U.S. Compost Council a couple years ago, were already working on ways to finger the seaweed up and let the sand drip below. I don't know, I mean, obviously, if that's gone into play, but sand is a killer in a compost pile. I mean, there are guys out there all day long who say, oh yeah, we put 15% sand in there. I'm like, hey, have you been to the beach? Have you ever lifted a wheelbarrow of wet sand? Are you smoking crack, dude? I mean, come on. Sand is a filter. It doesn't make anything grow. So, yeah, you're right. But getting the sand out first. And I don't care if you have to go to chicken wire on the bottom of the flatbed trucks just so it drops because it'll get back to the beach. Yeah, John.
Something that I mentioned yesterday was trauma. And you could use a pipe with holes in it that turns, and you could put the seaweed, fresh seaweed, in that pipe. Mm-hmm. And it would tumble, and then the sand would fall off.
But also, if you're just washing the seaweed, you're going to have the sand at the bottom. And as long as you build your washout, your troughs correctly, you're going to have sand dropping one way and your liquid dropping the other way. And oh my gosh, you can bag the sand and sell it to people for when the hurricane comes. I mean, it doesn't have to. You can take all those different pieces and just make them into markets. along the way. So.
Provide a big area.
Well, thank you very much for listening to me this morning. I really appreciate your time.